Okay, and start. Okay, my name is Cameron Owens. I am a ROS enthusiast. I do, in my previous job, I did a lot of ROS development, and there's still a couple projects that I'm working on that use a lot of ROS. As one of the event organizers for the Round Rock Robot Roundup, it's a local robotics group here in Round Rock, Texas. I've had a lot of questions of where people should get started doing ROS stuff. So this is the first of a couple tutorial videos for getting people started. And this is probably pretty basic for a lot of people, but it's a challenge for some people of how they, one, kind of first install ROS and then start doing some stuff. So the purpose of this video is to get people started up with ROS. What we're going to be covering is installing a virtualization environment or a virtual machine environment, and then installing Linux, and then lastly, installing ROS. So the first things that we're going to need to download, and this will probably take 20 to 30 minutes, possibly up to an hour, depending on your internet connection, is one, I recommend for people to use this tool called Virtualbox. What Virtualbox is it's a virtual environment for emulating and for running virtual machines. So this is a open source alternative to virtual machine and Parallels and several other tools out there. This is a tool developed by Oracle. So it's a very stable, very powerful platform that is free as in free beer. And so what you'll first need to do is come here to virtualbox.org/wiki/downloads. And this is the page where you will come and download VirtualBox. So depending on your host operating system, so whatever operating system your computer is running as the primary operating system, you will download the installer for that. So we have installers for Windows, we have installers for Mac OS, and then Linux, as well as Solaris. So here I'm running this on Windows. So you would just click here, start that download. It's going to take a couple minutes. It's 115 megs. So it shouldn't take too long. While that's running, the next thing that you're going to need to do is pull down Ubuntu. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Linux, Linux is an operating system that a lot of people use. That's the most popular operating system in the world, but runs mostly on a lot of hardware that people don't interface directly with. So Ubuntu is a variant of the Linux operating system. It's developed by Canonical. And it's another free, as in free beer, software tool that you can pull down. So if you go to ubuntu.com/download, you will come here to the download page, and we're going to download and install Ubuntu 14.04. The reason for using Ubuntu is because it's the official operating system for developing ROS on. And then two, the reason that we're using 14.04 is it's the latest version of LTS, which stands for long-term support. So it's the most, generally speaking, it's the most general or most stable distribution of Ubuntu. So depending on the configuration of your computer, you'll want to either select 64 or 32-bit. So I have a fairly fast desktop. It's not a killer machine, but I can definitely run 64-bit virtual machines fairly well. I have an i7 quad core with 8 gigs of RAM. If you have a laptop that has like 4 gigs of RAM and is a dual core, it's more recommended to use a 32-bit version of the operating system. And that's just because when you're running a virtual machine, basically, I know this isn't specifically correct, but generally speaking, it basically takes a lot of your resources half of your resources and will dedicate that to a virtual machine. Granted, you can change how your virtual machine runs, and really configure that. But generally speaking, it's best to think of when you run a virtual machine, it's running half of your hardware. And so if you don't have a whole lot of RAM, recommend using the 32-bit. So we'll select the version of the operating system that we want to use, and then we'll come here to the download. And so there will be a encouragement to donate, because a lot of what Canonical does is free for the community, and they have a lot of developers that do some really great stuff. They recommend that you donate to them, which I would strongly recommend as well because we're using their software. But we're just going to not now take me to the download and skip that, and it will start the download of that. Now this is a larger file, but should be relatively quick as well because they have servers all over the world, and it comes in pretty quickly. So now that we have both of these downloaded, I already have Ubuntu pulled down to my machine, so we're gonna cancel this. And so what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and install Virtualbox. So on Windows, it ships as a direct executable. So we'll just go through the next of say, hey, yep, well, we want to install this. Yes, yes, yes. Now this should take just a few minutes. It's a pretty small install. This is just letting me know that oh, I have Virtualbox already running. So it will take you through the installer. I'm going to exit from it because obviously I already have it installed. So let me shut this down for the moment. We'll save the machine state. So what Virtualbox does is it, just like it talks about, it will virtualize a desktop environment for you. And so once you have Virtualbox installed, what we're going to do is we're just going to come to the start menu, type in virtual, and it'll just take us to Virtualbox. So this is the kind of the virtual machine manager, or the Virtualbox manager for Virtualbox. So here on the left-hand side, you can see that I have already several machines set up. So let me delete this one that I created a while back. Let's remove this, delete all files. So the first thing that we're going to do in order to set up your virtual machine is we're going to create a new virtual machine. And so this will walk us through it. And if you type in the name of the operating system that you're using, Virtualbox is pretty smart about recognizing it, and kind of knowing how to properly configure your virtual hardware. You can also manually select which operating system you're going to have in a virtual machine. So I'm going to type in Ubuntu ROS, and what it did is it recognized the OS 2 and changed that to IBM's OS 2. So I'm going to change that back to Linux and change this back to Ubuntu. There it is, 64-bit. So we'll select next. So this kind of this next screen is about what I was talking about earlier, of how much RAM you have in your computer, and roughly how much you can allocate to this virtual machine. So I have a computer with 8 gigs of RAM, and typically when I'm running a virtual machine, I'm not doing anything else. So I can easily allocate about 4 gigabytes of RAM to this virtual machine. So this says that when my virtual machine is running, this is how much RAM from my physical hardware is accessible to this virtual machine. So strongly recommend to allocate as much as possible, but don't exceed the don't go into the red area because really you're not going to be getting a whole lot of performance because again you're maintaining two operating systems at the same time. So then we'll click next. So this is that asks you to create a virtual hard disk. So this is a file that will be kind of a virtual hard drive for your virtual machine. And so we're just going to say, yes, we want to create a virtual hard disk to create this sandboxed environment. And so one of the great things about open source software tools is they're usually very open to using other formats. So here you can see that VirtualBox actually supports Parallels. Parallels virtual hard disk. So we're going to use the VDI, which is the virtual box disk image. And then this next screen is about how much or how we want to manage this virtual hard drive. I recommend to use a dynamically allocated hard drive. What this means is that as your hard drive grows, that you will dynamically allocate more and more hard drive space to it. So a little outside of the scope of what we're doing here, but as you start to get up towards that upper limit of how much hard drive space you have, VirtualBox will expand that for you, assuming that you still have enough space on your physical hard drive. Okay, so this is kind of one of the most important screens of configuring a virtual environment. Now, although that we did say that we want it to be dynamically allocated, a lot of times that really doesn't work the way that it should. And so when you're running things and you start to get up to that upper limit, you can actually run out of hard drive space while the virtual machine is running because you can't expand the hard drive or the virtual hard drive while the virtual machine is running. So you always want to make sure that you have more than enough hard drive space. Typically what I'll do is I'll allocate about 25 gigabytes to my virtual machine. So this will create a file on my computer that will take up 25 gigabytes of storage for this virtual environment. I have this is accurate. Do I have a 2 terabyte drive? I only have a 1 terabyte drive in here. So I have plenty of storage on this computer. And so I recommend at least a minimum of 2 gigabytes or 25 gigabytes of just because we're going to be installing more stuff into Ubuntu. And Ubuntu out of the box is going to use 6.7 gigabytes of hard drive space. So if we only used that 8 gigabytes that they recommended, we would only have 1.3 gigabytes available, which really isn't even enough storage space for the updates and everything that we're going to install as well. So next we're going to create that. So that just creates the virtual machine file for us. And then once we have that started, we're just going to click the start button, which is just like pushing the power button on your physical computer. So this first screen that we see, because VirtualBox does create basically a whole virtual computer, what this is asking us for is for the startup information. You know, how do we get where do we load our operating system from? And because there's not any boot information on this virtual hard drive, we need to first point it to an installer. And so what we're going to do is if you pull down here, it's pretty smart. It'll recognize the previous disks that you've used in the past. And so I'm going to select this 1404 desktop. If your download of Ubuntu doesn't show up here, you just click on this folder icon, which will launch your file navigator. So here in my downloads, I'm just going to select this 1404 desktop image, and then we'll just click start. And then this will launch the installer. So what's going on right now is it's loading the operating system from that disk image that we downloaded. It's fairly quick, but not as fast as some of us would like. Now, sometimes you'll get these hardware errors. Um, I generally ignore those just because under the hood, VirtualBox is virtualizing everything. And so those hardware issues can sometimes be caused by virtual hardware. Okay, so we are now officially inside the Ubuntu installer. So one of the cool things about Linux is you can try it before you buy it. But what we're going to do is we're just going to jump straight into this install Ubuntu. So this will just launch like a regular operating system installer. For the sake of time, I'm not going to download updates while installing or install third-party software. I do recommend for you guys to do this just because it's good to have all of your updates and everything. Here you can see that it's making sure that you have at least 6.7 gigabytes available of hard drive space. So again, that's kind of coming back to why you don't want to use the default 8 gigabytes of storage. So I would leave you with 1.3, and really it would be less than 1.3 gigs, which really isn't a whole lot. So we'll click continue. Now, this is the really scary part for a lot of people that are not familiar with virtual environments. They see this erase your disk and install Ubuntu, and they see this warning that says this will delete all your programs, documents, photos, music, and any other files in all operating systems. And people panic. When you're using a virtual environment, it's important to remember that these virtual environments are perfectly sandboxed environments. And what that means is that when it says that it's going to erase your disk, what it's really going to do is erase your virtual disk. That's the file that we set up that we allocated 25 gigabytes of storage to in the previous screens when we were setting up our virtual machine. That is what it's talking about, that disk. Your virtual machine never sees your outside physical hardware. And so when it's talking about erasing your disk, this doesn't mean that it's going to erase the disk that your host operating system is running on, but rather the virtual disk that you're setting up. And so we're going to go forward and we're going to say install now. And it's going to warn you saying, hey, you're going to delete some information. And it's going to reformat this disk for being able to run Linux. Again, this is the sandboxed disk that we just created. So this is perfectly safe. It's not going to delete any information, though it is always important to make sure that you have a backup before you do any significant changes to your computer. So we'll click continue. And so we'll get the little spinny gear. So this will set up your time zone. So I am in the central time zone because I'm here in Austin, Texas. And then we'll click continue. So you can set up your keyboards it'll recognize different keyboard layouts and formats. So I'm just going to go with the standard English US keyboard. And then now we're going to set up our user information. So my name, Cameron Owens. Computer name, I really like Transformers, so we're going to call this Megatron. And then my username. So Linux, within Linux, you can't use usernames that have capital letters at the front. So it'll just automatically pull your first name. So let's put in a password. Okay, so now we have a password, and then we'll click continue, and the installer will get going. And so this will take not too long because it's just basically copying information directly from your hard drive to a folder. So it's not like it's coming from a CD. Man, you remember those days of loading operating systems from floppies where you'd have like 12 floppy disks and it would take like 6 hours? Man, those definitely were not the days. So this is going to run in the pursuit of saving time. I'm just going to let this run in the background. I'm going to do something that will definitely affect performance on my computer. And I'm going to run 2 virtual machines at the same time. So here I'm going to start up this Ubuntu ROS virtual machine that I already have. So I've already installed Ubuntu onto it and everything. Let's just take a look to see kind of where this guy's coming along. I experimented with this earlier, and it takes like 4 or 5 minutes to shut or to suspend a virtual machine while it's installing. So it takes a bit of time to launch a virtual machine while you're running another one as well. So what I'm going to do, because I don't really care about this one, I'm just going to power off the machine. So this is just like if you held down the power button on your computer. For everything. There we go. So this should speed this up a bit. One of the nice things about virtual environment or virtual machines is that you can pause and bring up virtual machines in specific states. And so as you saw earlier, I already had this machine up and running. So it's just resuming everything that I had done before. So once you have your virtual machine installed, it's just as if it was any other computer. It's going to prompt you to log in. So here we'll come in and we'll log in. Let's clear this out. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to install ROS directly onto our virtual machine. And so if you go to ros.org, and then under their getting started, there's an install. And I usually use the latest and the greatest version of ROS, just because a lot of what I do is a lot of tinkering, so I don't need super stable code. JTurtle is very stable. It's kind of the main version of ROS that everybody's using. And so here there are a lot of commands that you will need to run to install ROS. If you've never used Linux before, one of the main ways that people interact and use the Linux operating system is at the command line. So it's strongly recommended that if you don't have any Linux experience, go out and find a book on the Linux command line or getting started with Linux. There's a lot of great resources out there. With Linux being a free and open source operating system, there are a lot of free and open source documents and resources to learn Linux. So you'll definitely want to be comfortable and familiar with running Linux commands at the command line. Now, I've taken all of these instructions and I've put them into a bash script. So if you don't want to copy and paste everything, if you go to github.com/candidcipher /roundrock robot roundup, you'll see that there is a directory here in this repo called ros install.sh. And what this is this is a shell script that will automatically run all of the commands to install ROS on your machine. So first, what you'll need to do if you want to use this is you'll need to install Git onto your computer. So let me close this and show you how you get to the terminal. So here, you'll either click on the Ubuntu icon, or you'll hit Command if you're on a Mac computer, or you'll hit the Windows super key if you're on a Windows keyboard, and you'll just type in terminal. which will bring up the terminal application. Now, if you've used a lot of Mac or Windows stuff, this is similar to terminal just on a Linux, or similar to the command prompt on Windows. And in order to install the Git resources that we need, you'll type in this command sudo apt get install Git. And then you'll put in your password. And so what this does is this will go and check the repositories and the sources for information on how to install the Git package. So I already have this installed, so it ran through the script, but it should only take a few minutes at most to install Git. And so now to make to pull down a repository, what you'll do is we'll cd into our documents workspace or our documents directory, and I'll mkdir for make directory called workspace, and I'll cd into workspace. And then we're going to use this command called git clone https://github.com/candid-cipher/round-rock-robot round-up. And what this is going to do is this will go and fetch all of the software from my GitHub repository. So if I type ls to list all of the contents of this, you'll see that I have this folder called Round Rock Robot Roundup. So I'll cd into there and then cd into ROS. And then we'll execute this bash script. So we'll type in bash ROS and then tab install.sh. And so this will go through the process of installing ROS. It'll go and add all the sources and then get an update, and then it will sudo apt get install ROS Jade desktop full. So once it finds all of this information, now I already have Jade installed on this virtual machine, so I don't have to type in yes, but it'll ask you if you really want to install this. You just type in Y, and then you're good to go. So within a couple minutes, should install everything. Now, a quick test to make sure that you have ROS installed on your computer or on your virtual machine is to type ROS and then hit tab twice. So in future videos, you'll notice that I use a lot of tab completion. This is a really great and smart way to make sure that the operating system automatically fills in your stuff. A quick note, when you double tab at the Linux command line, it will list all of the commands that use the key characters that you're typing in. So when I typed in ROS and then did the double tab, it listed all of the ROS commands that are now part of my Linux bash. So if I say ROS core, it should start the ROS core server. So hopefully this was valuable to you guys to get started. We'll be doing a couple more videos in the next few days of how to get started, walk you through some of the ROS tutorials. And then in a couple weeks, we're going to have a meetup in which we start playing with Arduino, ROS, and the ROS message server. So thanks. And stop the broadcast.